Om Badram Karne Bishnuyama Deva Badram Pashye Makshavirya Jatraha Tirairangai Stuštuvagam Tastanubi Yashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let us all pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, thou abidest in all, thou art all, thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge, and bliss. Salutations unto thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Good afternoon and happy Easter. Today we have a distinguished speaker whom I will introduce in a little bit. But before that, I would like to invite Reverend Wendy to sing a couple of songs. You there when they cross tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Oh, sometimes it causes to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the cross? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when the stone was rolled away? Were you there when the stone was rolled away? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there
billows rolled away. God so loved the world, God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoso believeth in him, should not perish, but have everlasting. God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world. God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. God so loved the world, God so loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoso believeth in him, should not perish, but have everlasting life, everlasting life. God so loved the world, God so loved the world, God so loved the world.
Thank you so much for these very beautiful songs, Reverend Wendy. It is a pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce our speaker today, revered Pravrajika Shuddhatmaprana. Pravrajika Shuddhatmaprana is a nun of the Vedanta Society of Southern California, hosted at the Vivekananda Retreat Ridgely. She first came in contact with the Ramakrishna mission in 1967 when she met her guru, Swami Satprakashananda, at the Vedanta Society of St. Louis. She has traveled extensively in India on various visits to our centers there and also lived there for 12 years. She received her sannyas vows in India in 1996. For many years, she has been active in the publication work of the Ramakrishna Order, editing numerous books and articles, and also writing many articles. In addition, 3 books by her have been published: The Divine World of the Alvars, Indian Saints and Mystics, and Sri Ramanuja, The Life Force Behind the Bhakti Movement of India. She has spoken here at the Vedanta Society of Providence many times, and it is such an honor and pleasure to have her again. She'll be talking to us on the subject, My Peace I Give to You, the Ultimate Blessing of Jesus.
As you know, excuse me, Easter Sunday is a very special day in the Christian religion. It's the day that Jesus first appeared to his disciples after he had been killed. But in order to understand this event, why this happened, we should look at some events in Jesus' life that led up to that day. For about 2 years before this Easter occasion, Jesus had been teaching and healing the sick, the lame, and the blind in the area of Galilee and Israel. Israel was the Jewish homeland, the promised land. That is, it had been promised to the Jews by God himself when he led them out of slavery in Egypt. This was long before Jesus' time. But at the time of Jesus, Israel was under the subjugation and oppression of the Romans, as almost all of the lands around it were. This, in fact, was the most glorious period of the Roman Empire. The Jewish people could still worship in their temple and synagogues, and they could practice their religion, but they were governed by the Romans, and they had to pay heavy taxes to them and suffer other indignities. To give a well-known example, shortly before Jesus was born, his parents had to move temporarily to Bethlehem because the Romans decided to do a census. According to the Romans, this required that all adult males had to pick up and move with their family temporarily to the home of their ancestors. Only then could the census begin, as they couldn't have people moving about the country when they were being counted. Now, Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, was a carpenter in Nazareth, whose ancestors came from Bethlehem. So this meant that Joseph had to abandon his carpentry business and go to Bethlehem with his pregnant wife and stay there for perhaps a year or more until the census was over. And as we know, by the time they reached Bethlehem, this little town was so overwhelmed with people that the only place that they could find to stay in was the stables with the animals, which is where Jesus was born. So this is how the Romans ruled. Very little is known about Jesus' early life. He was said to be about 30 years old when he began his ministry, and for 2 years, he went from place to place, gathering disciples and preaching a new message. But not all the Jewish rabbis were happy about this new message. In fact, when Jesus went back to his hometown of Nazareth to preach, some of the rabbis there were so infuriated by what he said that they tried to kill him. Obviously, they didn't, because he lived for a while longer. But what was this new message that made them so angry? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall attain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now, this is a message of love. God's love for us and our love for God. What's wrong with that? Moreover, Jesus manifested this love, God's love, in everything he did, including through the miracles he performed. When the blind came to him, he gave them sight. When the lame were brought to him, he healed them and made them whole. Lepers also were healed. There were even said to be some people who died, and he brought them back to life. Jesus was a walking manifestation of the Lord and the Lord's love, and people could feel that love in his presence and in his words. Hearing his teachings and seeing him, they felt that they no longer had to fear a wrathful God. They felt God's love not only through Jesus' words and actions, but also through his presence. Now, it's not that love did not exist in the Jewish religion. Judaism is, in fact, a very beautiful religion. But it's just that at this time, it had basically lost its soul. As often happens with religions, the Jewish religion had in Jesus' day become bogged down by laws, rituals, and ceremonies, and it had also some corrupt and greedy leaders. In fact, the same thing happened in Christianity at the time of the Reformation. But hearing Jesus' message of God's love for human beings and seeing Jesus manifest this divine love through his miracles, ordinary people flocked to him along with a few devout Jewish rabbis. But the hostile attitude of other priests and rabbis created a dangerous situation. We should also remember that Jesus never denied that he was the promised Messiah, the Messiah whose coming had been prophesied in the Jewish scriptures. In fact, he even admitted several times that he was that Messiah. And of course, this in particular infuriated the rabbis. But at some point, the rumor spread that Jesus was going to start a rebellion to overthrow the Romans and become the king of the Jewish people. This he never said. It was just wishful thinking on the part of the oppressed people. In fact, he told the people, "My kingdom is not of this world." But still the rumor took off, as rumors do. After 2 years of preaching, Jesus understood that it was time to take his message to Jerusalem, even though he knew through his divine insight that he would be killed. Now, Jerusalem was and is the heart and soul of Israel and of the Jewish faith. But in Jesus' time, it was also the headquarters of the Roman government in Israel. Jerusalem was where the temple was, temple with a capital T. Other towns and villages had synagogues, but there was and is only one Jewish temple. The original temple had been built by King David's son Solomon and is said to have been completed in 957 BC. It stood on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, where it was said an angel had appeared to King David. However, this temple was destroyed in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who had invaded the country. About 70 years later, after the Jewish people regained their land from the Babylonians, the second temple was built in 516 BC on top of the ruins of the first temple. Then in 18 AD, during Jesus' lifetime, King Herod renovated and enlarged this second temple. So when Jesus was worshiping in the temple as an adult, this was the renovated second temple. But in 66 AD, about 34 years after Jesus' death, the Israelites had had enough of Roman rule, and they rebelled. Unfortunately, not only was their rebellion crushed, but 4 years later, the Romans destroyed their temple in 70 AD. Though the Romans did not actually drive out the Jews were never able to rebuild their temple, and they gradually spread out all over the world. There is, however, one portion of the western wall that surrounded the second temple that still exists. Though a Muslim mosque was built and still stands over the site where the second temple had stood, the Jewish people are able to go to that wall. It is called the Western Wall, or sometimes it's called the Wailing Wall. Like many Jews at that time, Jesus decided to go to Jerusalem at the time of the celebration of the Passover festival. This festival is when the Jewish people celebrate their liberation by the Lord from the Egyptians who had enslaved them. So in those days, it was a custom for people to go to Jerusalem if they could for the occasion. By this time, many people had heard about Jesus and of the miracles he had performed. So when he was about to enter the city, sitting on a lowly donkey in all humility, people came outside the city gate in droves with palm leaves to welcome him. The day was a Sunday, and it is now known as Palm Sunday. It is the Sunday before Easter. Why palm leaves? Well, you see, Israel is a very dry desert country. It's very much a desert country. There are not many flowers there, but what they did have in abundance was palm trees and palm leaves. So they welcomed Jesus by laying palm leaves down on the road as he passed by. And they chanted, "Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Then some of the people who had heard the rumors about Jesus being the King of the Jews started calling him the King of Israel. Now, right after Jesus had entered the city, he went to worship and teach at the temple. But after entering the temple, he was infuriated by what he saw. There were people selling things for offering, and also there were quite a few money changers as people came from distant lands to worship there. There's nothing wrong in that. But what was happening in this holiest of holy places? The people were being cheated and robbed by these shopkeepers and money changers. In anger, Jesus overturned their tables and chairs and drove them out of the temple, saying, "You have made this house of prayer into a den of thieves." The scribes and rabbis were shocked and tried to challenge him, but they could not refute what he said. Then, after seeing Jesus teaching, they became so jealous that they started plotting to kill him. For the next few days, Jesus was teaching and healing people, while the scribes and others were trying to test him and make him say something blasphemous, like he was the King of the Jews. But they could not catch him. But finally, they tempted one of Jesus' own disciples, Judas, to betray him, to say that Jesus claimed he was the King of the Jews. And the time for Jesus' arrest was fixed for Thursday evening, right after the Passover supper, when Jesus would go to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. Throughout the week, Jesus had been warning his disciples that the time had come when he would leave them, but they could not understand, or maybe they didn't want to understand. Now, this Passover supper is a special meal in the Jewish tradition. The celebration, as we said, is to remind the people how God had saved them from slavery in Egypt. But on this particular Passover evening, Jesus inaugurated another kind of celebration, a ritual to remind his followers of his sacrifice for them and how he has saved them. The original Passover supper is a reenactment of the story of salvation, the salvation of the Jews from Egypt. But Jesus added another layer to the celebration by inaugurating the reenactment of his story of salvation. Now, as they were just visitors to Jerusalem, the disciples had to search for a place to have this Passover meal. But Jesus knew with his divine insight where they could find a room, and he told them. After purchasing the food, they all gathered there. Now, it was a custom for a slave or servant to wash the feet of the host's guests when they came to the host's house. But as there were no servants here in this borrowed room, Jesus washed the feet of the disciple himself in spite of their objections. Jesus knew the persecution they would face after his death, and this was his way of impressing on their minds that his love would always be with them. And though the disciples could not understand it at the time, he also wanted to impress on their minds why he was going to have to suffer and die. But he knew the disciples would only be able to understand this much later. It was the custom for the host to break the bread, a special unleavened bread for Passover. So Jesus took the bread, and after blessing it and breaking it into pieces, he gave the pieces to his disciples with the words, "Take, eat, this is my body." Then he took the cup of wine. Now, wine there is drunk like water. A desert area, water is scarce, but grapes are plentiful. So what they drink is wine. So Jesus took the cup of wine, and after blessing it, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." In the Apostle John's account of Christ of the Last Supper, Christ then gives his last teachings to the disciples. Some of his most beautiful teachings are given here. Again and again, Christ tells his confused disciples that he would be leaving them. Yet he also tries in various ways to comfort them and let them know that the Lord would be with them and give them strength and grace. First, Jesus gives them a new commandment, a mandate. And this is why the day of this Passover meal is the Thursday before Easter, is called Maundy Thursday. The word Maundy comes from the Latin word mandatum, or command. The English word mandate comes from this. Jesus says, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another." You're probably familiar with the Ten Commandments. A few days before this, when the priests were trying to test Jesus, someone came to him and asked, "What is the greatest of the commandments?" And Jesus replied, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength." The second commandment is this: you shall love your neighbors as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. But now, just a few days later, Jesus gives to his disciples a new commandment. In the Bible, it is unclear whether this was meant just for his disciples, but by giving the name Maundy Thursday to this day, the Christians honor this as the day Jesus gave a new commandment for everyone. And just as Jesus washed the feet of his disciples and is about to give his life for all, so also people are reminded to sacrifice their pride and ego and love all. Now, one of the disciples, Philip, asked Jesus to show them the Father, that is, the Lord. And Jesus replies, "Have I been with you so long and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves." That is, if you cannot believe that Jesus is one with the Father because he himself is saying it, then believe because of the miracles he performed. Then Jesus takes us even further. This is not just about him. He reassures his disciples that they will see him after his death. And then he says, "Because I live, you also will live. In that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I in you. So here, Jesus is assuring them that they will soon realize that this presence of the divinity is also within all of them. Note here that again and again, Jesus will be continually saying that the divine is within. Then Christ gives his disciples his most beautiful, his greatest blessing. He says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." For 2 years, Jesus had been preparing his disciples for this blessing, and now, the day before his death, he gives it to them, the blessing of ultimate peace and freedom from fear. At that time, only he knew what the next few days would bring, and he hoped that with these words, the fear and heartbreak of the heart of the disciples would be somewhat eased. But he also wanted them to know that this peace he was talking about was not really about the dangers ahead. This is why he said, "My peace." He explains next that he is not talking about peace in any worldly sense. He is giving them divine peace, realization of the divine within. As Jesus indicates, the peace that he is talking about is not something that the world can give. It is spiritual. It can only be found within. And it is the ultimate spiritual state. Later, he will let them know that he has been preparing them for this state, for this blessing. So this is a special blessing, a blessing for those whom he has made his own, who will risk their lives to spread his message. My peace, as Jesus says, this is not any ordinary peace. It is the peace that we all crave for in every little thing we do. We seek it every moment of our life, yet we always look in the wrong place. Like the musk deer running all over to find the source of the musk smell that is within its own body, we continually search for peace out there in the world somewhere, little realizing that it is right within us. But there are a few who recognize that the search for this peace is an inner journey, and that religion can set us on the path to finding it. This is, in fact, why the various religions exist. The same message is reiterated again and again in the Hindu scriptures. For instance, we find in the Chandogya Upanishad, "Nalpe sukhamasti, umayva sukham." There is no happiness in the finite. Happiness is only in the infinite. Uma, infinite. Uma literally means the biggest. Then in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, we find, when people will be able to roll up the sky like leather, then there will be an end of sorrow without knowing the effulgent one. That is to say, it will never happen. You can never roll up the sky like leather. That effulgent one is Bhuma, it is Brahman. It is the infinite, eternal, Satchidananda absolute. So the end of sorrow will only come through knowing that infinite one. But why can't we get peace and happiness here, just as things are? It's just not possible, says the Chandogya Upanishad. Nalpe sukhamasti. Swami Lokeshwarananda explains, why should we bother about God or Brahman or something that is said to be infinite? Because we want to be happy. Perhaps you are very fond of sweets and enjoy eating them. But when you have finished eating them, your joy is gone. Moreover, if you eat too many, then you become sick and are miserable. Only in the infinite is there real joy, real happiness, real peace, peace that is constant, always there, and never disturbed. Shankara says anything that is finite causes trishna, thirst. That is, it increases your desire for more. Whatever you get, you desire still more. Suppose you possessed the whole world. Even then, you would not be happy. Therefore, that which is finite is dukkha bijam, the seed of unhappiness. As long as you are confined to the limited world of sense experience, you can never be happy. You have to go beyond sense experience. When you attain the state of Bhuma, you feel you have got everything you have ever wanted. Now, of all the Hindu scriptures of India, the scriptures that deal with the goal of human life, the Upanishads are without doubt paramount. This is because their sole emphasis is on attaining this supreme state of peace and blessedness. The Upanishads call this state Brahman. Though the various schools of Hinduism have different interpretations of Brahman, all schools agree that Brahman is the infinite and ultimate reality that underlies this phenomenal universe. And all the Upanishads agree that this state can be attained. After all, this state is our very birthright. It is not something outside of us, something to be grasped with the hands or seen with the eyes. As Jesus said, this is not something that the world can give. It is within us as our very own self. It is not separate from us or from this universe. Now, Jesus is not finished. In a particularly moving instruction, Jesus tells his disciples, "Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." Abide in me and I in you. What does this mean? All day, every day, our egoistic minds always try to put our little selfish selves in the center. If not the center of the world, then at least the center of our small lives. In practically every thought we think, in everything we do, we make that thought or act about us. Even if that thought or act is about our spouse or family or friends, even then it is about us because it's about our spouse, our family, our friends. So what is Jesus saying here? Forget yourself, lose yourself, put your mind on me, dwell in me. Jesus is saying, put your whole being in me. Life is not about you. Life is about love. And what is that love according to Jesus? It is God. Love is the flow of God. And we have to make ourselves one with that flow of love, that flow of God. And when we are one with that flow of God, the infinite, then we will truly love our spouse, our family, the whole world. Then we will truly get peace and joy. As Jesus said earlier, the first commandment was the most important. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. Then the second commandment naturally follows. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So what does Jesus mean by the word me and abide in me? What does he mean by my peace? remember that Krishna says the same thing again and again in the Gita. Put your mind on me. Think of me. Surrender everything to me. Remember me and fight. Again and again, throughout the Gita, he says this. So just as Krishna knew that he was divine, that he was totally identified with the divine, Jesus also knew he was divine and was totally identified with the divine. In the text, Jesus never gives an explanation of what exactly he meant by the word me, but we find from the words of the disciples that they understood. We believe that you came from God, they said. In other words, we know that you are divine, and this divinity is not of this earth. The disciples' minds had been purified, and they obviously had had some revelation as to who this me is that Jesus refers to. Jesus had even told them, already you are pure because of the word I have spoken to you. So he felt that their minds had been sufficiently purified, and they were now ready for his blessing and final message. But here we should stop for a moment and think. The disciples understood what Jesus meant by the word me. They also understood what Jesus meant by the word Father. When they said, we believe that you came from God, they understood what God was. But what does the word God mean to us? When Krishna or Jesus says, think of me, do we understand what that me is? Without our own experience of God or Brahman, how can we understand what it is? Whatever others may say it is, without some experience, these words still remain just a concept to us without any life or meaning, and this cannot bring us peace. But now someone could object. Didn't Jesus just freely bestow this gift on his disciples? To us, it seems like it. We should remember that Jesus spoke these words the day before he died, but he had gathered the disciples together 2 years earlier, and they had been following him ever since. Two of these disciples, in fact, I believe it was Andrew and John, had previously been followers of John the Baptist. But John the Baptist himself had sent them to Jesus. The other disciples were each called by Jesus himself. Jesus had said to them, follow me, and they followed. Each one of them felt an intense divine attraction, an attraction not of this world, and they were forced by this attraction to leave their homes and families and everything else to follow Jesus. So the disciples could know what Jesus meant because, as he says, they had been purified. They have had 2 intense years with him, following him, learning not only from his words, but also from his life. But this does not mean that the disciples had not been tested. During these 2 years they lived with him, they lived with Jesus just as he lived. St. Matthew recorded that once a scribe came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Seems this was too much for the scribe, as Matthew's account never mentions him again. Yet the other disciples whom Jesus called did follow him, and they lived with him till the end. The Sermon on the Mount also is full of Jesus' entreaties to people to surrender to the Lord and depend on them. He said, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap, nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they?" And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? Therefore, do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For your heavenly Father knows that you need these things. But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Again, we know Jesus also taught his disciples to pray. The very night he was arrested, while he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, he expected Peter and some other disciples that he took with him to pray with him. And fortunately, in spite of his scoldings, they kept falling asleep. And we don't know what they mean by prayer also. The word prayer is used, that in some of the Christian traditions, the word prayer actually is closer to our idea of meditation. But besides prayer and surrender, it is not known what other spiritual practices Jesus taught the disciples. We, however, have access to many devotional and Advaitic spiritual practices that can intensify our spiritual life. For those who prefer a devotional approach, who prefer the ideal of a personal God, that is, God with qualities, the Upanishads suggest various spiritual practices called upasanas. The Upanishads are not always non-dualistic. They also recognize a devotional path. Even Shankara, in his commentary on the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, defines upasana in this way. Upasana is mentally approaching the form of a deity or the like, as it is presented by the eulogistic portions of the Vedas relating to the objects of meditation. Then concentrating on that form while excluding conventional notions till one is completely identified with that form, just as one is completely identified with one's body, conventionally regarded as one's own self. Now, this type of meditation is, in fact, what most seekers of the personal God try to do. They are given by their teacher a form of a deity or symbol, such as Om, to meditate on, as also a mantra that relates to that form or symbol, and they are asked to repeat the mantra and meditate on the form as being within themselves. One essential qualification here is faith. Faith in the spiritual teacher and faith in the scriptures. It was this faith that the disciples of Jesus proclaimed the night before his death. Now, according to most teachers of Vedanta, there is a difference between the type of spiritual practice done by seekers of the personal God and that done by seekers of the impersonal absolute. For the latter, the seekers of the impersonal absolute, they prefer to use the term nididhyasana instead of upasana. What is nididhyasana? According to Saraswaracharya, nididhyasana is not ordinary meditation, but a meditation of a higher order in which there is no sense of exertion of will, no conscious employment of the thinking process. It is the constant presence of a conviction of the form, I am Brahman. And yet it falls just short of the direct realization of the self. But whatever the definition may be, the term nididhyasana is also normally translated by Vedanta teachers as meditation, and it implies a type of sadhana. As we have seen, we find in Vedanta, in both its devotional and non-dual aspects, that all sadhanas or spiritual practices are meant to take the aspirant to the realization of the divinity within us, whether it is meditation on a personal God or on the impersonal absolute aspect of God, and the impersonal absolute Brahman. Regarding this, some people who worship a personal aspect of God may object. I don't want to be sugar, I want to eat sugar. Such aspirants prefer to establish a relationship with the divine. But Vedanta answers that a relationship is possible only between things of the same category. There must be divinity within oneself to even contemplate having a relationship with the divine. Even to meditate by visualizing the deity as being within one's heart implies that the deity is already within one. And here we find this beautifully illustrated in Jesus' teaching to his disciples. Abide in me, and I in you. I am the vine, you are the branches. Is the branch of a different category than the vine? Oh, they're the same substance. We also find that Jesus, in his teachings, uses a command, abide in me, and I in you. Jesus already abides in the disciples. This is what he is saying, yet the disciples must be conscious of it by realizing their oneness with him. Then only will Jesus' blessing work. Just the fact that Jesus has taken the disciples to this point, that is, to command them to be conscious of their oneness with him, says how far Jesus has led them on the spiritual path. As said before, their minds have been purified through their years of austerity with him. They have also recognized and acknowledged who he is. They have seen him as divine. Now there is only a little more to do, become awakened to that presence within themselves. So this is why he says, abide in me and I in you. Then they will be filled with him, filled with that love, which is God. Although originally a few of the disciples had thought that Jesus would become a political leader, they now believe they understand who he is. Now we know, they say, that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. This was a critical moment for the disciples with its affirmation of Jesus' divinity. It was critical for their faith in him and in his teachings. But most of all, without this faith in Jesus' divinity, his blessing would not work, nor would they be able to carry out the work he wants them to do in the troubled times ahead. Never mind that they could not at that time fully comprehend Jesus' blessing. Even blessings take time to be absorbed and assimilated. After all, later that very night, out of fear for his life, Peter denied 3 times that he was a follower of Jesus. Yet the blessing of his master was infallible. Peter eventually became the rock on which the Church of Jesus was built, as Jesus had earlier predicted. Here we should note that before meeting Jesus, Peter's name was Simon. Jesus gave him the name Peter, which either means or sounds like the word rock in Greek. And when giving him the name Peter, Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church. And in a literal sense, the first basilica of Christianity, St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, is said to be built above the tomb of St. Peter's body. Now Jesus adds something else. He said, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. He's repeating that command that he gave them at the beginning. But he's adding something else, abide in my love. In essence, Jesus is saying, I am that divine being, that divine love. Now see me, the Lord, within you, and see yourself as divine and abide in that love. Then see me, that divine love, in each other. Through me, you will do my work and love all by seeing me in all. The disciples by now could understand what that divine love is. They had seen it and felt it in Jesus, and their minds had been purified. But for us, we need to first understand what that divine love is. As indicated earlier, upasana on a personal aspect of God first requires faith in the teacher and in the scriptures. But as the mind is purified, we gradually start to feel that divine love, and we attain genuine love for our ideal. Then our progress is quickened, as this love will automatically fix the mind on God and turn it away from the impermanent. Once a monk came to Swami Shivananda and told him that though he was practicing spiritual disciplines, he was not getting any joy in his practice, nor was he finding any peace. Swami Shivananda replied, "Look here, my boy, peace is not such an easy thing to attain. The way to peace is very difficult, full of thorns. But if one sincerely wants to realize God, it is certainly true that he will receive the Lord's grace. Spiritual efforts without sincere love for God are fruitless. Sincere love is what counts." The Master used to say that when the three attachments, that of a devoted wife for her husband, of a mother for her child, and of a miser for his wealth, when they become one, then one realizes God. If anyone feels the same intense longing as would result if these three attachments were united, only then does he have God vision. Sincere love brings God realization, and in that alone is genuine peace and joy. Of course, without the grace of God, one cannot have such love overnight. That is why regular practice is necessary. The Swami Shivananda is saying that if one is sincere in one's desire for God, grace will come. But spiritual practice should be continued to acquire this grace. And this we see in the disciples of Jesus. On that last night of Jesus' life, they received the grace of the Lord. Yet even then, Jesus gave them a test. How will they know that they are abiding in him? Jesus says, "Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing." So this is the test. You can tell from your life whether you are truly abiding in God or not. Suppose we begin to practice meditation on God. Whatever our practice may be, there is a test. Is our life changing? Are we being transformed for the better? Are we becoming more loving, compassionate, selfless, and less egoistic? If we are, then we are going in the right direction, no matter what our concept of the divine may be. So this is the way to divine peace, peace that surpasses all understanding. That same peace that Jesus bestowed on his disciples. My peace, as he called it. Ramakrishna also says, where you find peace, there is the end of the spiritual path. In Advaita, non-dualism, that peace is the realization that we are one with infinite love and joy. It is the direct realization, I am Brahman, I am that infinite. Jyotiraham, I am that divine light. To the disciples of Jesus, that peace was their realization of their unity with him and with God. Again and again during his teaching, Jesus reminds his disciples, I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. Jesus further says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. So whatever the word peace might mean in various religious traditions, I think we can get the answer here from Jesus' words. Abide in my love. That is to say, peace is divine love itself. Earlier, as we said, Jesus had said, "Abide in me." Now he is saying these two are the same. He is saying that if you abide in him, you abide in his love, because he and love are the same. This is, in fact, what we see in Jesus' own life, that he was that divine love itself, and he was one with the Lord. And we know from the lives of the disciples of Jesus that they found that peace. As we said, that peace was the knowledge of their unity with Jesus, that they were the blissful branches of that vine of love, that they were themselves divine. It was in this knowledge that they realized the peace of Jesus, and their joy was full. But what about Easter? Does Jesus have a message for Easter? The very first words he spoke to the disciples when he appeared to them on Easter Sunday after his passing away were, "Peace be unto you." Peace was his message. Peace was his ultimate blessing. And he commissioned his disciples to spread this message, peace to all nations. And he then prayed to the Lord for those who will come in the future through the teachings of the disciples. He said to the Lord, "I pray that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us. May they be brought to complete unity to let the world know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me." Yes, yes.
Is it? Oh, Pradams Mataji. Um, so you talked about how peace and happiness can only be attained through the infinite. And obviously, it's a very human experience to want peace and happiness
Yes.
in the moment and in our mortal lives. And I think of the old adage that, anything worth having is something that must be worked for and something that has a great cost, typically. My question is finite suffering the price of infinite peace? That the reason why we suffer and why we experience finite difficulties, because that is the test, if you will, as Jesus gives tests and such to reach that infinite Brahman.
I missed a word there when you first started to say the question.
Well, my question was: is finite suffering or
Suffering.
earthly suffering
Finite suffering.
the price or the test to attain infinite peace, infinite happiness? Is it necessary for us to suffer in a finite capacity or struggle in a finite capacity in order to achieve infinite peace?
Well, our suffering comes because we don't have that peace. And so it's not necessarily the price, it's just in the natural course of things. The only way we can find real peace and happiness, as the Chandogya Upanishad says, is in the infinite. And if we're all constantly struggling to find it in this world, we're not going to find it. And we're going to keep bashing our heads. We're going to get a little bit of suffering, but as Shankara says, this is Trishna. It gives us thirst. We want more and more. So we think we can get a little peace and happiness, we think, but it's not the real peace that we crave for. Everyone craves for, without knowing it, we crave for that infinite, for that peace and joy, the bliss of the infinite. And so maybe you could say what you're saying is right. It's the price, but it's something that that just is in the course of our lives. It's just gonna. This is the nature of this world. We're going to bump up against our feeling of wanting the infinite when we bump up against the finite. When we don't recognize that this finite is not what we really want.
So much, a wonderful presentation and all the parallels between, and of course, Vedanta. And just sort of a follow-up on what this other gentleman had said, my other spiritual suit, there's a passage that says, suffering is a touchstone of spiritual growth or progress. And I always kind of railed against that. Do I have to suffer in order to get spiritual progress? But I don't know. I mean, it's
Who said this?
well, it's in our big book.
It's in our what?
Big book, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But I just don't know whether you had any thoughts on that. Whether one has to suffer to have. I mean, why can't I progress spiritually without suffering? Anyway.
Yeah. You can get the little tastes of joy in your spiritual practices give you the thirst to go, the will to go on, you know. So you get the little joys, but this only makes you want to go further, to go on and on.
Heartfelt thanks, Mataji, for this very inspiring talk that reminds us that if we really want happiness, we need to seek the peace within. And that, as Jesus teaches, the way to do that is to abide in the Lord. You offered such an illuminating exposition on what it means to abide in the Lord and the connections to Vedanta teachings. In closing, I'm going to request Reverend Wendy to share with us some more songs.
Low in the grave he lay, Jesus my Savior, waiting the coming day, Jesus my Lord. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Vainly they watch his bed,
Jesus, my Savior. Vainly they seal the dead, Jesus, my Lord. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Death cannot keep its prey, Jesus, my Savior. He tore the bars away, Jesus, my Lord. Up from the grave he arose, with a mighty triumph for his foes. He arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. The final song I'd like to share with you is in Latin, one of the church languages history. Give us peace, dona, give nobis peace pacem. And it's a 3-verse kind of thing that you can do in a round, but until we really know it, I'll just sing it through and you join. Lord, give us. Dona nobis pacem, pacem. Dona nobis 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 pacem, pacem. Dona nobis 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 pacem, pacem. Dona nobis 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 pacem.
Thank you so much, Reverend Wendy, for these very beautiful songs you shared with us today. We'll do announcements and then closing prayer. On Tuesday, we're going to have a special lecture on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna from Pravrajika Shuddhatmaprana. On Friday, stories from Srimad Bhagavatam. There's going to be a video lecture. Coming up on Sunday is a special lecture by Chester Bonsek, The Divine Comedy. Saturday, April 6th, the first Saturday of the month, There's going to be a day-long silent meditation from noon to 8 p.m. And then a reminder that on April 27th, Saturday, there's going to be a day-long spiritual retreat on poems of Swami Vivekananda by Swami Atmagyanananda, which requires registration. You can register online or with Naomi here. And we're going to do closing prayers, and then there's Arati and Easter supper, and you're all invited. May the divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest himself unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Stainless Lord, assuming human form, stainless Lord, assuming human form, transcendent yet filled with love. You free us from the stain of sin and ornament our world. Consciousness is a form. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Your eyes always purified by knowledge. Looking at them, illusion is gone. Ocean of shining love and feeling, ever inebriated in your infinite love. Your feet always dear to your devotees. Your feet always dear to your devotees. From a boat to cross this world, reveal to us that God incarnate and the Lord of all things, helping us join with you. Your mind's always set in the divine light. Your mind minds always set in the divine light. This we can say through your grace. Destroyer of our worldly sorrow and compassion, soul, infinite is your word. Your life's offered for the world's deliverance. Your life's offered for the world's deliverance, saving us from darkness and fear. Renouncer of our worldly stuff and spurning sensual life. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Lord of monks, you are the best of men. Grant to us pure love for you. You're fearless and you're free from doubting, with your mind very firmly resolved. Causeless refuge of your devotees, causeless refuge of your devotees, renouncing caste and birth. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even sightedness. You give love and even sightedness, to remove our anguish here. Our treasure is your holy feet, which take us very soon across this puddle of life. You give love and even sightedness. You give love and even sightedness, to remove our anguish here. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's gate. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's gate. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Greetings to you, O Lord, beyond both speech and mind. Yet you are the basis of both. O Lord, yet you are the basis of both. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's gate. Great light of all lights, blazing in the heart's gate. Darkness is destroyed by your light. O Lord, darkness is destroyed by your light. Langa Ranga Bhanga. These are all the sounds of Vedanta. Langa Ranga Bhanga. These are all the sounds of Vedanta. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Spiritual songs devotees are singing for your worship divine. Jaya Jaya for your worship divine. Haru Haru for your worship divine. Shiva Shiva for your worship divine. Breaker of all our worldly bondage and adored by all, we adore you too. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Sarvamang graciousness sublime, all noble ends you give to us, granting us refuge, all seeing God. O Mother Divine, our love to you. Creation, preservation, dissolution are your powers, eternal one. Nature's real basis, nature's essence. O Mother Divine, our love to you. We come seeking refuge from anguish. Be our Savior through your deep concern. All our suffering remove, Goddess. O Mother Divine, our love to you. Victory, O Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. Blessed Mother Divine, our love to you. जय श्री राम कृष्ण देव की जय। जय श्री शारदा देवी की जय। जय श्री स्वामी विवेकानंद की जय। जय श्री बुद्धदेव की जय। जय श्री जीसस क्राइस्ट की जय।